We'll do the roll call. Matt Berry, Chair here. Vice Chair Lisa Guthrie. Treasurer Sharman Burnham. Secretary Michael Stringham. Research and Feasibility Committee Chair Jonathan Malahan. Jason Polverari. Patrick Allisey. Yorkson Jean. Caprice Pine. Michael Ratowski. Jan Barnes. Lisa Black, I believe, is on the Zoom. Pauline Nefsey. She may be Zooming in as well. She has babysitting duties. Holly G. Hamilton and Raymond Chladny. Thank you all for volunteering your energy and time toward researching the feasibility of incorporating. It's been a great year so far. I'm really proud of how the group's working together, and I'd encourage everyone here, there's candidate statements on the back table, or you can go to our website, wearebirchbay.org, but take a look at the candidate statements, the qualifications of the people up here. It's quite impressive, and we're lucky to have their time. Moving on to the approval of the January Steering Committee meeting minutes. They were uploaded to Google Drive and shared via email to the group earlier this week. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Can we have a motion to approve? There's a correction required?
Item 7, it was the Communications Committee that requested the budget, not the Research Committee.
All righty. Lisa moved, Capri seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes with that correction? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So we've got a couple of quick committee reports, and then we'll talk a little bit about the research that our Research and Feasibility Committee has done, and then we're going to turn it over to Sheriff Tanksley, our special guest for tonight, and then there'll be an opportunity for everyone to ask questions. I'll start with the Executive Committee report. The purpose of the Executive Committee is to provide a direction for the timely progress of research, communication, and negotiations of the BBI mission, and I think we're off to a great start. Committees have all had their first meetings. Each of these different 4 committees meets once per month, and kind of the format of our group is we hold monthly steering committee meetings that are open to the public, but they're more about gathering information to present to the community at these quarterly meetings. So this is our first quarterly community meeting of the year. We'll have one in May, one in August, and then our annual general meeting in November. But the committees are working really well together, and I'm really proud of them. So thank you for all your hard work. An update to the professional feasibility study that I mentioned in the introduction. Whatcom County has selected Community Attributes Incorporated, CAI, as the feasibility study update consultant. They were chosen by the county because of their qualifications and ability to remain impartial. So I think we're going to get a really good study. Jonathan here from the Research and Feasibility Group was a part of the committee that interviewed the 3 applicants for the feasibility study, but the Birch Bay Incorporation Association chose to not cast a vote in the selection of the feasibility study consultant because we didn't want to appear to be influencing it. We want it to be as credible as possible. And I think we're going to get a great one. Currently, Whatcom County Planning and Development Services is working with CAI to finalize the contract. Then it's going to go to the County Council for approval. And we're still hoping we can have it by August, but at the pace it's moving with the county, that may or may not be the case. So other items, thank you to Northern Light for spreading the word about this meeting. And reaching the community is always a challenge, even though, you know, we've got our website and our email lists and all that. So we appreciate the coverage. The best way to stay involved is to sign up for the email list. We give meeting notification emails out monthly. And then today there was a city and county elected officials meeting about new urban growth area planning policies. Lisa, our vice chair, and I tuned in and watched. It was interesting to hear them talk about what they have planned for Birch Bay. The next executive committee meeting is Monday, March 3rd at 5 p.m. And with that, I will pass the mic down to Lisa for the Communications Committee report.
Thank you. I'm not going to go through everything on the report. It's page 3 of your packet. You can read it. I think the most important thing is a couple things. If you are in an HOA, we would like contact of the people who manage your HOA. We would like to be outreach and come talk to groups about the BBIA, what we're doing, and make sure that everybody can get all the information that they want about this process. So see me after, write it on a piece of paper and leave it for us. We're going to start having those meetings. We've got a few scheduled already. So if you can help us out with that, that would be great. We're going to have our outreach booth at the events that are listed there. And if you know of other community events where we can have a presence so we can talk to more people, let us know. We're going to have a newsletter starting in March, going to be printed and distributed through the Northern Light so that we reach even more people. 10,000 copies go out in this area, and it'll reach some areas outside of Birch Bay, but hopefully that helps spread the word. And the biggest change here in the last month or so is we've launched We Are Birch Bay. That's the name of the website. If you go to if you're bookmarked to the old website, it'll still take you there. But We Are Birch Bay is our new name, marketing, and we have a new presence on social media, which we were locked out of our old one before. We're going to start posting meeting notices and our sound bites. What we're calling our sound bites is the next page of your packet is just a brief overview of how many officers some of the other cities have around us versus what we currently have as a piece of Whatcom County. We know that we often, as today, we saw multiple officers in the area. However, we have one assigned 40 hours a week. So that's the comparison there. We're going to continue with those. Jan and Yorkson are doing a fabulous job at making these information in a way that's easy to put out to people and easy for people to digest. So that is pretty much all I have to say. And I think Sherman is next.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sharman Burnham. I am the Treasurer and Finance Committee of this group. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, thank you all for coming. We so appreciate it. It makes us feel like what we're doing in our outreach is actually affecting people in Birch Bay, and they'll come and listen to hear all the facts, pro and con, and this is what's important. We're going to go ahead and start quickly with the treasurer's report. Everybody has a copy. I won't go through it, but I will like to say that we do have income coming in to the tune of $200, which was a personal donation from Michael Stringham. C-Shop donation is $100 per month for $300. And then, of course, people might not understand, we actually have expenses, and the expenses are for our outreach. And we have a Zoom, we have our rental here to attend the meetings here at the church. We have a mailbox where we're receiving consumer letters. We have an email program with Constant Contact, and of course our Zoom. So our expenses are $660.62 in a month, but we do have in our checking account $3,752 to work with. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept the treasurer's report. Any discussion on the treasurer's report? Yes. Yes, it's through January to February. I like to do it from meeting to meeting. Is all approved? Yes, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. Okay, I'd like to go through the budget very quickly. The budget needs to be approved for 2025. We had each of our committees go ahead, sit together and discuss what they felt was important for their committee to function. This year, we're finding it more of an outreach that we need to outreach more by mail, by Northern Light, and so forth. And so because of that, you'll notice that as far as the committees, we have association meetings with a budget of $2,760. We do have communications, have instructed that they would like a total of $13,400. That's because of our direct mailers. We also have research committee so that they can go with the community surveys, which have been real popular, $2,400. And of course, with the executive and finance committee of $1,250. 1,300. We do have a total of expenses of roughly 20,000. So people go, wow, where in the heck does this money come from? Well, it comes from a number of different things. One, we are pursuing, always looking for grants. Since we're not a 503c, we're unable to be able to go to a lot of grants, but we do have Friends of Birch Bay Library. They're our sponsors. And last year we were able to get a neighborly grant for 5,000. So hopefully this year in March, we're going to be able to apply for that. But that's not all. We do need other support, and it's been luckily coming through like the C Shop and so forth. The thing to remember as finance director of BBIA, we need to move forward with the mission. Specifically, where do we get the necessary funds to pay our community outreach? This statement to me is very, very important because there's always people that don't quite understand what we do. BBIA is not here to advocate for or against incorporation. Our role is to gather the facts, assess feasibility, and ensure that every resident of Birch Bay has access to clear, unbiased information. When the time comes from Birch Bay to decide on incorporation, if that happens, that decision must be based on knowledge, not speculation or untruth. That to me is so important. So to continue the work, we need resources. Financial support allows us to conduct the necessary studies, consult experts, provide the accurate fact-based materials to the community. Because without the funding, we cannot effectively complete the research, outreach, and education necessary to give the Birch Bay residents a full and fair understanding of the options before them. So to address this, one of the things that the Finance and Communication Committee has come up with is we did develop a pledge card, and each one of you may have gotten that, so you'll see how it looks. The pledge card basically on the front is a simple pledge option, whether it's a one-time gift or a monthly commitment. Just like the generous pledge from the C Shop, we've even included a PayPal QR code for easy online payments, or you can simply mail in a check, and of course, we gladly accept cold, hard cash. And we have our wonderful little donation jar in the back. Now, on the back, we've outlined that we projected for expenses 2025 of $20,000. This does not include any lunches, any dinners, anything that we think we might want to do. It's strictly for paying for expenses. So we encourage you to explore the BBIA's research online, learn about our mission and the impact we're working to achieve. So if you're here and you believe in the cause of being able to get information out to our community, please, we certainly appreciate your help. Anything small, whatever, would be very helpful. So to the Birch Bay Steering Committee, the Executive Committee would like to emphasize the pledging towards our 2025 budget should be an integral part of our commitment as leaders of the BBIA. It's important that we demonstrate to the community that we, as those guiding this initiative, are fully invested in this work, not just in words, but through action. This is a significant ask, and we ask each of you to take it seriously. Your participation will set the tone for others to follow, showing that we are united in our commitment to the cause. So I encourage you to lead by example and show the community that we're all in this together. So our community members here tonight, your support's invaluable, your financial help as we continue this vital process in a way that's transparent, community-driven, and rooted in facts. So every contribution, no matter the size, makes a meaningful difference in moving our mission forward. So if you feel good about supporting us with a pledge, we ask that you please fill out a card or simply drop something in the donation card. So with that being said, I would like to ask that the 2025 budget be approved. Awesome. Any discussion on the budget? Good. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you very much for your time.
All righty, good evening. I'm Jonathan Mallahan. I chair the Research and Feasibility Committee, and our role really is to gather and share information about the idea of incorporation. Tonight, I've got a brief presentation for you that is focused on the relationship or comparable cities' tax rates, their levy rates, and the level of public safety services they receive. I want to just be really clear that the purpose of this data and really what we intend by it is not that this is absolutely definitive. This is an estimate. It's based off of some real analysis and research. You can have confidence in that work that's based off of public documents, real adopted city budgets, experts within those cities sharing data, but it is not to replace or shouldn't subordinate any work that the professionals will do when they update the research or the feasibility study. So we don't intend to replace that work. It is intended to be a basis for conversation, and we do intend to just share this information and any questions that come out of the conversation around this with the experts that will be doing the research and feasibility, the feasibility update when that work is undertaken. So the methodology we used to gather this data, there were 9 cities that were interviewed. We asked them various questions about the levels of service and the staffing patterns that they have for public safety in their cities. 6 of those were in Whatcom County, and 3 others were cities of comparable characteristics to Birch Bay. They may have similar size or demographics, or be located on a shoreline. We utilize public records from their department public safety budgets adopted by their legislative bodies, and we used public records from the county assessors' websites to establish levy rates. There are additional limitations on the data. There are some variances in how cities do accounting in their budgets. So that there's a margin of error in here for that. But there's also the fact that police department budgets, public safety budgets, they deliver or contain a different basket of goods depending on the city. So some public safety budgets might include court system, or they might include code enforcement and animal control. So there's also a little bit of variance in our analysis that's based off of that. We did not correct for that variance in the basket of goods in those budgets. So one question we wanted to try to answer is, what could we afford if taxes didn't change? We've heard really clearly from our study that we did, from the survey, the community survey that over 600 people responded to, that impact on tax rates is the #1 concern that people have about incorporation. That's really reasonable. So we thought we should try to address this question. If taxes don't change, what could we afford? Well, the 2008 feasibility study also asked this question and essentially came up with the answer that 9 law enforcement officers were required for 24/7 coverage, that the annual expense of the police department in 2008 would be about $923,000, and there'd be one-time startup costs of $435,000. Now, the feasibility study came to the conclusion that the city of Birch Bay could afford similar levels of service or greater than they were receiving. They anticipated that it would be slightly under that 9 number that might be funded by the city. What we did was we said, okay, of all the cities we interviewed, we noted that they spend 42% of their general fund budget on public safety. So we will, for our analysis, assume that a city of Birch Bay may choose to spend 42% of its budget on public safety. And if we look at, we've done past studies to say what kind of revenue do we think that Birch Bay could generate, and we estimate that it could generate $4.88 million in general fund revenues. And if you've got questions about how we arrived at that number, I'm happy to answer them. But it's about $4.88 million of general fund revenues. That's with no increases to the taxes that anyone in Birch Bay pays. So if we assume that 44.2% of that general fund is spent on public safety, there's about $2.16 million that Birch Bay could afford to spend on public safety. So we looked at how much do cities spend per officer. Now, this number is not to indicate that cities are paying officers $195,000. That is absolutely not the methodology. It is if you reduce the cost of a public safety department, simply divide the total cost of that department, all of its expenses, equipment, overhead, everything, facilities, that's about $195,000 per officer. So that's the methodology we use to arrive at that figure. Based on that, and the assumption that Birch Bay would spend 42% of its general fund revenue on public safety, Birch Bay could afford about 11 police officers, which exceeds the number required to deliver 24/7 services. So we then wanted to say, what are the levels of service in other communities relative to their levy rates? So you can see this chart here. It's pretty simple. Birch Bay is on the left. We've got Blaine, Ferndale, Linden, Everson, Sumas, Stanwood, and Cedar-Woolley. The orange bar is the number of officers that the city has per 1,000 citizens. And then the blue bar is the levy rate that those individuals, those owners pay in that city. So if the levy rate is, that's how much taxes they pay per $1,000 valuation on their home. If you want to figure out what that would be, if your home is worth $1,000, you're paying $6.87 in tax. What we note is that for cities that pay comparable levy rates to Birch Bay, they uniformly have a greater level of service than Birch Bay is currently receiving. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not in any way a criticism of the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department has a massive responsibility to service an amazing number of square miles. And so it's not intended to disparage in any way the hard work and service that we receive from the Sheriff's Department. I just want to be really clear about that. What we're trying to suggest here is that with the resources a city can generate and their ability to efficiently deliver public safety services in a relatively smaller area, the impact is you get more officers per capita for your smaller area. So that's really what this shows, is every city that pays a comparable amount, they receive more service than us. And cities that have elected to increase their taxes further, some of them have spent that on public safety, others have not. Now, what's the right level of service for Birch Bay? That's not really something that we can answer. Ultimately, that needs to be answered by elected officials informed by voter priorities. But I do want to call out that the Washington Association for Sheriffs and Police Chiefs does report that the national average is 2.31 officers per thousand. And the comparable cities that we looked at, the average of all those cities was about 1.98 officers per thousand. I will note that Washington State ranks 51st in the nation for the number of officers per thousand citizens statewide. I believe it's 1.14. It's actually shockingly low compared to every other state in the nation. So based off of our analysis here, we estimate that Birch Bay could afford at least 1.1 officers per thousand citizens with no increase to taxes. So I already addressed this. What happens next? This is not definitive. We'll share this information and any questions that come out tonight with the feasibility committee. And with that, I think we want to hear from our special guest. So I'm going to wrap this up.
All right. Thank you very much. I will let Sheriff Tanksley introduce himself, but we did want to give you a little token of our appreciation. We do appreciate everything you do out here. So here's a little thank you card signed by the group. No, there's no gratuity. I wish if I would have thought ahead. Yeah, of course. And then we do have, I like the Whatcom Museum to go look at the old photos of Birch Bay. It's cool to see what this place was in the 50s, 60s with the carnival and all that. This is a photo of a retired sheriff's deputy. I'm still trying to track down his name. If anybody knows the name of this gentleman, on the motorcycle here in front of the 10-mile-per-hour speed limit sign on Birch Bay Drive. We'd love to know, but the story that I was able to gather from a couple of my neighbors who've been around for a while was that he retired, he loved to ride his motorcycle, and he loved Birch Bay. So he was allowed to come hang out in Birch Bay in the summertime and just post up and look surly. And I don't know if he was able to write any tickets or anything like that. But at the time, it was so busy with cars going up and down the drag that people couldn't really go faster than 10 miles an hour. But I wanted to give this to you just to thank you for coming. And then also, if it's in your office and you see it, you think of us, you know. Yeah. And I've got one for our deputy, Joel Douglas, too. So I'll hand it over. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Yeah. So that's for the.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I do have a PowerPoint. So if I turn around and look, It's just because I'm trying to keep on track. So I'm Donnell Tanksley. I'm the sheriff of Whatcom County. Been the sheriff since about 14 months now. So it's going really well. I think we're almost up. All right. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So first, I think it's important to let folks know about the history of the sheriff's office, and I want to spend about a minute or two and let you know the resources that we have at the sheriff's office. So the sheriff's office was actually started in 1854, so 171 years ago. So we have a long history here in Whatcom County, and I'm really proud of that. If you go to the next slide. So the population of Whatcom County has really grown in the last 10 years. So right now, countywide, we're at about 231 to 235,000 people in Whatcom County, and unincorporated Whatcom County, we're at about 92,000. All right, so if you look at the FTEs, we're allocated 225 full-time employees. Also, our combined budget about $48 million. We have 4 bureaus and law enforcement, corrections, civil, and the Department of Emergency Management. So next, I'm going to really get into the law enforcement aspect. That's going to tie in to what Jonathan was talking about. If you go to the next slide. So this is the primary functions that we provide. So although we have one deputy assigned to Birch Bay that's working 40 hours, you're actually getting a multitude of services, a multitude, not just one deputy. So we provide law enforcement services to all people in Whatcom County. We support and work collectively with all the municipal, state, tribal, federal law enforcement agencies. We enforce court orders, also enforcement at the county courthouse, corrections, the jail, coordinate with our volunteers in terms of search and rescue, and then we do emergency management. Next slide, please. All right, so these are the things that's actually provided to all unincorporated Whatcom County, including Birch Bay. We have our patrol division. We have our detective division. If there's a major crime, our detectives are going to come out here, and they do come out here. We have our patrol investigator. We have our behavioral health deputies, our Marine Patrol unit. I'm sure you've seen them out there before on the bay. We have our K-9 unit, drug task force, search and rescue, traffic, SWAT unit, crime scene investigators, and our drone unit. Those are a lot of resources that we're providing right now, today, to all of unincorporated Whatcom County, including Birch Bay. If you go to the next slide. So sector 1 up there, or zone 1, that does include Birch Bay. Right now, we have 3 different shifts, and those shifts overlap. We have a minimum staffing of, and this is just for patrol, of 4 deputies and 1 sergeant for each shift, and those shifts also overlap. But we also have our traffic unit out there. We also have our detectives out there. So although Joel here is assigned to Birch Bay, the resources are actually vast. If you go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a snapshot of the top 10 calls here in Birch Bay. Top 10, and this is from December of 2022. And this is data that I received from our 911 dispatch center. It's called Whatcom, and it's fresh data. I got it today. Traffic calls, 981. Follow-up investigations, about 500. Then you can see assist citizens, agency assist, watch for. If you wonder what a watch for is, that's when someone calls 911 and said, hey, I think someone is driving down this street in a reckless manner. I don't have any information on them. And then the dispatch will send out a watch for. And then we have, unfortunately, at least 157 calls of people arguing that are in a relationship. So this data, again, is from December of 2022 until today. If you go to the next slide, please. So I broke it down by month and year. So Matt also has access to this whole presentation. So again, this is data, fresh data. So if you look at 2023, we had about 3,000 calls here in Birch Bay. And then 2024, it went up almost 600. And then just for the 2 months we're in 2025, 455 calls of service. If you go to the next slide. All right, so I do want to introduce Deputy Joe Douglas for the folks that don't know him. He is your Birch Bay deputy. So if you could give him a round of applause. Thanks, Joe. Would you like to say anything? No, you don't have to.
I just want to say I have really enjoyed being out here. This is start of my second year. So I bring 17 years of law enforcement experience with me. Last year was my first year out here. Really great connecting with everybody, talking with everybody, and I look forward to the next few years ahead.
So just want to highlight, I'm not going to read all those few things that Joe has done out here in the last year as far as his community engagement. He did the drug take back twice. He attended many meetings with the chamber. When I was talking to him, he's like, sir, but I missed 2. I was like, I think you're doing pretty good. So those are some things that he's done over the last year. If you go to the next slide, and it continues. So he worked with different neighborhoods, doing the neighborhood watch program. He did active shooter training as well, and then also he helped to do some mitigation and problem solving in terms of some parking issues. If you go to the next slide. And then also crime prevention through education. He did an interview with the Northern Light, met with some HOAs. I know earlier they were talking about asking for names of HOAs, and then also more meetings with different neighborhood groups. So for me, actually being out in the community is what we do. And that's what I talk to all deputies. So to me, we're all part of the community and we should be out in the community. So just want to take my hat off to Joel. Next slide. All right. So, we're talking about how much does it cost? So these are fresh numbers from the sheriff's office today. This is just personnel. This includes salaries and benefits. What it does not include is overtime. This depiction is just 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, a records and ID technician, 5 deputies. And again, no overtime is included in this. And you're looking at 1.2 million just in flat cost. It does not include any type of startup cost or any cost that needs to be sustained. So if you go to the next slide. I did get some questions that was sent to me, so I want to answer those. What is the current level of service the sheriff's office provides to Birch Bay, and how would that change if we incorporate it and contract it with your department? That would simply depend on the contract. I've read many contracts in the last couple of weeks in terms of different sheriff's offices, different communities. But I will tell you that the 11 that Jonathan talked about is not far off. That's about the same number I came up with. So the national average per 1,000 police officers is actually 2.5 to 3.5 nationally. Here on the West Coast, we're way down from the East Coast. So on the West Coast, we're at about 1.6. Here in Whatcom County and Washington State, we're at about 1.1. So for example, if you wanted to go the 1.6 route, if you did incorporate, you're going to need about 16 officers. If you go to 1.1, 1.0 route, which we have at the sheriff's office, then you would need about 10 deputies. Next slide. Will the sheriff's office assign dedicated deputies to Birch Bay, or would deputies still cover multiple areas as they do now? So if you did incorporate and you did contract with us, they will be assigned to Birch Bay. On the 2 slides ago with that lieutenant would actually be the chief of Birch Bay, and then that sergeant would be the sergeant. So those deputies will be assigned to Birch Bay, officially the Birch Bay Police Department, if that was to happen. Next slide. How does the sheriff's office approach community policing? Will there be opportunities for Birch Bay to tailor that approach to our community needs? Well, certainly, I hope you believe that being out in the community is important if you see all the work that Joel's doing. But certainly, if you did incorporate that city manager or city council would definitely have influence in the services that we provide to that particular community. Next slide. Will the sheriff's office recommend establishing a satellite officers or substation in Birch Bay to improve community access and visibility? Absolutely. I think that would be a necessity. If you look at, for example, Stanwood, they have the Stanwood Police Station. It's not a big place, but it's a place for the officers to certainly do their work. It's a place for the community to come to talk to the officers. But also, if you have a building, potentially part of that contract for those deputies to use that building, a lot of contracts actually have a credit, part of the contract for using that building. So I know in the current Stanwood contract, I believe it's about $48,000 a year off the total price, the total cost of the contract for the use of the building. Next slide. Does the sheriff have a suggestion by population or square mileage of suggested recommended staffing for a potential city our size? We did talk about that. What problems does he anticipate? And will we eventually establishing our law enforcement? Would he be pleased or challenged to work on a contract basis? I think it's incredibly tough to start your own police department from scratch. I mean, of course, a lot of places have. And here in Whatcom County, the last city we incorporated in Whatcom County was Everson. I believe that was in 120 years ago or so, right? So it is possible, but I think the challenge would be just really for the residents, because it would be something new. So I think if that was to happen, and just so you know, I'm not advocating either way for incorporation or not. I'm just giving what I believe the facts are. But I think it would just take some time because it would be new. And of course, with the folks here, I think it would be a lot of input. So for us, the challenge is really just getting the right contract done for the community. And as far as that last question, it's about the will of the people. So if you know, if Birch Bay did incorporate and you were certainly interested, the sheriff's office would certainly be at that table. Next slide. That's it. All right. Any questions? I have no idea. But I will tell you, if this was to happen, certainly those partners, will be at the table and so we could work those things out.
Just to interject for a second here, there's about 30 people online who can't hear if you just speak up in the crowd. So what we'll do, I should have said something earlier in the meeting, but I'll come around with a mic if you want to raise your hand, and then that way that the people who are, okay, would you like me to bring you a mic to, okay, all right. No, it's okay. Is there anyone else who has a question for the sheriff? All right, Ruthie, here you go. And please state your name too for the folks at home.
Okay, actually, I've got a few. My name is Ruthie Danielson. I've lived here for 43 years. Yeah, so quite a while. And I've actually called the sheriff's department because I live on the corner of the Bay and Blaine roads, and there's always stuff that happens there. My question goes back to, you put the dollar value for your operating budget for labor on those numbers. What is your operating budget for vehicles and fuel, which is also a horrific cost nowadays? Then also, what about insurance for your officers? Is that covered somehow through the county? Would we have to have our own insurance? How would we cover that liability if they were from Birch Bay? So those are first the few questions.
Well, I'm certainly not going to speak for legal. But I will tell you, in terms of the vehicles, that cost would be in the contract. And right now, our vehicles are kept for 8 years, just past 100,000 miles, and then we have them replaced. But there are other costs too. There's equipment. There's all the equipment inside those cars, all the weapons, all the gear. It's a lot. But all those things will be itemized for sure. If this was to happen, but in terms of the insurance, I don't have an answer for you that I'm comfortable giving.
You were the Blaine police chief, correct?
Correct.
Okay, for how many years?
4 years.
4 years. So on your operating budget for that city, did you always have the money that you needed?
No.
Okay.
And in fact, we don't have the money that we need here either.
Right. So the budget process for you as the police chief, where was your funding source derived from? I'm sure there's different buckets. Property taxes would be one of them. B&O taxes would be another. So could you describe that process?
Sure. So essentially, all those different taxes, once they go to the city or the county for law enforcement, all of our funds come from the general fund mostly. We do have some grants, and then also as far as the jail, we do have a jail fund as well. But to answer your question, most of our funding comes from the general fund. And when Jonathan had up there about 42% of any general fund, I think that's about the target range, sometimes up to 50. You're welcome.
Sheriff, thanks for being here tonight. So you've been a police chief in a municipality and you've been a sheriff in a county. Can you describe the similarities and the differences in those jobs?
Sure. I think the similarities is that we're all here to help people. I think the difference is, as far as organizationally, is that the sheriff's office, we have a larger area. We do have more resources than most of the small cities. Maybe except for Bellingham, but that's not really considered a small city. But one thing we do have is coordination with each other and with the sheriff's office and cities, we do have what we call mutual aid. So we do help each other at any time. So I don't know if you want me to get in more detail or not. Yep, you're welcome.
We're getting some questions from the chat, but in the meantime, is there anyone else in the room who would like to ask a question?
I do want to add to what he said too. I think something you also have to think about really is the challenge of recruiting. That's a big challenge, whether you're a sheriff's office, whether you're a small department. If you ask any of the chiefs here in Whatcom County, any of the chiefs anywhere in Washington State, recruiting is an issue. So you have to think about, if you have 11 positions, can you fill those positions? So you really have to think about that.
Hi, Dave Barry. I live in Birch Bay. I was looking at the chart here, and I mean, the average is one police officer per 500 people. We have one, this isn't exactly true, 1 per 10,000, because I mean, we have all the deputies all over, but I think the problem is they're spread out over a huge area, 2,100 square miles. And the response time is, I mean, 30 minutes to an hour. I had a guy, I had to deal with this felon neighbor, and it took 45 minutes for the law enforcement to show up. So the response time. So I think, we talk about expense of a police department. I'm looking on the paper here. There's 6 examples of where the people were able to pull it off, forming a police department. There's 500 other examples. So it may be challenging, but it's like you said, it's just change is probably the biggest thing people getting used to. So anyways, just seems like I don't feel like I'm getting what I'm paying for tax wise, and it's not your fault. You're working with what you have, but we seem woefully underserviced. Like, when they're here, they're great. Deputy Douglas and some colleagues, captured or found the pyromaniac that was around real quick, and we dealt with them. They're super professional, but just seems like we're not getting anywhere near what we're paying for with law enforcement. Like I say, I think that just the problem, we have a department that's spread out over a huge area. So I think if we're a city and had a much smaller area, we could get 5 or 10 minute response times instead of 30 minutes to an hour. So.
And the average response time is 13 minutes and 30 seconds. Yes, in Birch Bay.
Do we have some questions ready to go online here?
I do have one.
Okay, Yorkson's going to read it out for us.
Yeah, so Stephen is asking, what sort of major crimes, if any, in Birch Bay, Blaine area last year? So robbery, homicide.
Were there any major crimes, I believe is what he's asking?
I know there were some major crimes, and I don't have those numbers or the exact location with me, unless Joel has some information. But I mean, certainly we have major crimes all over the county, but in terms of a specific incident, I know we have some, but I just don't have that information with me.
Are there any other ones from online? None right now. Anyone else here that would like to ask a question? You, sir?
Thank you. Sheriff, I had a couple of questions. In another lifetime, I used to do what you do. And I'm a little worried about the deputies' safety out here. I had a fairly significant incident in my neighborhood, and one deputy showed up, and his backup was in search and rescue mission or something. And so he didn't get one. And I said, well, you know what? I'm not what you want probably. And I know you guys have lost all your reserves because of COVID. You can't insure them or something, or wouldn't make them get the vax or whatever. So you've lost that 2-man car thing. So I worried, as we presently are, about his safety out here. And I told the deputy that was, can't remember if it was him or not, but I said, hey, I got your back. I'm not gonna let you walk into this without knowing, at least somebody's gonna call you an ambulance. And the other thing, the second question of that is, if I'm not mistaken, I heard you go on publicly that you won't enforce the federal regulations for illegal immigrants that are in our county. And if he's out here, and I've been in this situation where I've been up against 4 illegal immigrants, and the only tool I had in my toolbox was, you guys are going into the ICE bus. Now, it's not 100% solution. Back then it wasn't. Sometimes they'd return, but they knew that there was some jeopardy. If you're not going to enforce the constitutional law, that puts him even more at risk. Now, we don't have a huge problem with it here, but what if he does? What if he comes out here when it's a large party on the beach and he's forced with looking at 8 or 9 illegal immigrants, and you say, yep, sorry, dude, turn your back, go home. I have a concern about his safety and the other deputies that are out there.
And thank you.
Any other questions from the room here? Any other questions? We do have one online here.
Okay.
Yorkson?
Yep. So Chalk is asking, would the city of Birch Bay contracting with the sheriff still be able to draw on the resources like investigator, SWAT, K9, and so on? Or would they have to fund their own? That's the question.
So in many contracts, that's spelled out to actually have those services. And I keep going back to the Stanwood contract because it's very similar to if Birch Bay was to actually incorporate, and those services are actually listed in those contracts.
I received a question via email today from someone in Birch Bay Village that I thought I'd ask on their behalf. And it was in regards to policing in Birch Bay Village. So they spend a lot of money on security there. Would a city of Birch Bay contracting with the sheriff's department be able to say, we're going to have one deputy that's just serving Birch Bay Village, because just that community is as large as some cities? Is that something that a city could do?
That's really interesting because of the HOA aspect of it. Right, so I'm not going to answer that because I think one of our lawyers for the county would be able to answer that. But anytime it has that HOA component, then it gets really tricky.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan has a question up here. If we've got a couple of mics. Oh, thanks, John.
Sheriff, I'm curious if you have any guidance for us as what steps would you like all of us to take to make Birch Bay safer, prevent crime, and how can we best support you and your deputies in doing their jobs?
Yeah, well, actually, I would say to report crimes using 911 and not social media. I think I'll start there. And I'm not making light of it, but it does happen a lot. And I know there's different platforms, so I won't name like a specific one. But hey, I think this person looks suspicious. Has anyone else seen them? Please call 911. And what we say is, if you see something, say something. And we really mean that. So I would just say, just please call 911 as starters. But after that, I think the neighborhood watch programs, are really effective, and invite us out as much as possible. And when Joel isn't working and there's an event and we know, we definitely could send someone else. So I definitely don't want Birch Bay to think, hey, he's off, he's on vacation, therefore they don't have anyone to come to that event. We'll send someone. So the question was, have I found that retention was a challenge? And, you know, sometimes it is because sometimes people might decide to go to another department. They might decide to get out of law enforcement altogether. Unfortunately, sometimes people get injured and then they have to go through that process. But I will say right now with the sheriff's office and patrol, in March of last year, we were at 100% staff. Right now, we're down 3 patrol deputies. In corrections, we're down eight correction deputies. So if you know anyone that wants to be a correction deputy, please send them our way. But in terms of trying to keep people, sometimes it's a challenge. I will tell you that it was really a challenge between 2019 and 2023. But now I think we're actually starting to make, you know, some headway.
Mr. Allison here had a question, and then I'll bring the mic over to you.
Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to tell you that I was delighted when Alpha was in Blaine and he moved to the county. And I was delighted when you went to Blaine. I'm delighted with you in the county. It's not a perfect situation. My question actually came from somebody else. And their concern was, you know, if we contract with the sheriff's department to take care of Birch Bay, Peaceful Valley isn't very peaceful now. It'll get worse, won't it? Because you won't be able to afford to put people out there. Will a contract at Birch Bay, considering the financing and everything, would that mean less service for outside areas?
It would not, because a contract would be additional FTEs. So let's say if you needed 10 deputies, we wouldn't take the 10 deputies that we have and assign them to Birch Bay. You know, it would be 10 additional deputies. So in essence, the sheriff's office would grow by 10 deputies.
Hello. Oh, I said Pat's talking.
Oh, the question was, would the county budget shrink a little bit? I don't think it'll shrink because we'll actually be adding deputies, and then the city of Birch Bay, if that existed, would be paying those wages, and we would still be maintaining our current level of budget authority at that time.
I actually have 2 questions queued up from the Zoom. Do you want me to go first?
No, her hand is up first.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
My question is, you were talking about neighborhood watch. How do you do neighborhood watch when you're surrounded with Airbnbs?
Yeah.
It makes it really difficult. And a lot of people are walking in now, are coming by Uber, so you don't even know people are there. It's kind of,
Joe, did you want to answer?
yeah, he knows my area.
Joe, I've got it. Yeah.
I understand the frustration with a lot of the Airbnbs. It's a completely circulating clientele that are coming in and out, and you don't really know. But connecting with maybe the people, the actual owners of the Airbnb, and if that isn't there, you have basically what you know of the residents that are there full time, and you have to work twice as hard just to be vigilant. Make sure that you prepare your property, safeguard it the best you can against any sort of potential harm that may come. So getting the lights up, getting the shrubs cut. There's a lot of tools that we can help provide and talk to you about just to kind of make your house safer. Because you may run into strangers walking through that could be there for a Airbnb stay.
Yorkson, do you want to take those questions? And then if there's just maybe 1 or 2 more here, we want to leave some time for open session if there's anybody who wants to make public comment.
Sounds good. So first one, coming from Jim, I think I heard that we could have 11 deputies based on our current budget. What would be those 11 people do if they are dedicated to Birch Bay? And since we only have one full-time person dedicated to Birch Bay, are the other 10 people working around the county?
I don't understand the last part of the question.
Do you want me to just repeat the question?
Sure.
Since we only have one full-time person dedicated to Birch Bay, are the other 10 people, I assume other police, are working around the county?
It sounds like the question is maybe not understanding that. I think when they said 11, they're thinking about the model that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, good.
yeah.
Let's move on to the next question. The next question is coming back to Chuck. Birch Bay has a lot of vacation homes that are empty for many months of the time. Does that present special problems that need to be addressed or mitigated?
It's a good question. I think what we know just in general law enforcement is that when you do have a lot of vacation homes, that you tend to have the potential for theft and burglary. We do have a mechanism where online, if you're going out of town or if you're not going to be at your house, that you certainly could let us know, and then we could check on that. But again, that also goes back to the neighborhood watch as well. But and I mean, I've never owned a vacation home, and I can't speak to, if people should or should not let people know if they're gone, because for some folks, that's kind of a private thing as well, but I think it can present a challenge. But I also want to say the gentleman in back who asked a question about the immigration, I could talk to you when this is over. So, okay.
And then, Miss, I think you had another question?
She just wanted me to ask the one I originally asked. Want me to ask?
Sure. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, sorry. I've been asked to ask this again. What does it mean if the gates are closed for Point Whitehorn? Like at 10 o'clock or dusk? Like, what does that mean for police?
As far as that.
For access, emergency access, like we get sheriffs that come down Grandview. I live around sheriffs, I'm super lucky. But what does that mean? Like if the sheriff's departments or our police departments down here and State Park's closed and they have to go all the way out to Bay Road and past BP and down, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, and well, certainly, I think that's something that we would have to talk to the state park officials about. Maybe that's something that they might consider changing. But I certainly understand what you're saying, because if the gate is closed, then that's a long route, getting around. So, correct.
And the trains alone. So if you're adding that, that's a consideration for the people in Point Whitehorn. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if this was to come forward at some point, I think I know we will take a critical look at all the different areas to see how we can access those areas, not just police, but fire as well.
Sheriff Tanksley, thank you so much for coming out here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We really respect what you do, and we're glad you could be a part of this conversation. We pride ourselves on trying to run a tight meeting that ends on time. And so it's 7:15, we've got about 16 minutes left. The last item on the agenda was open session. So if there's anybody who has a statement to make, not a question, something like that, we're happy to give you 3 minutes to speak to the group. Is there anybody who would like to make public comment to the group? Ruthie? Oh, I forgot to mention, Ruthie brought some maps that are in the back that show, one's a blown up image of the Birch Bay urban growth area, and it shows the different urban residential zonings there, and then a full zoning map of the county too, just so you can get kind of an idea of what the current zoning is. Yeah. Start. So I'll hand it over to you for 3 minutes and you can say whatever you like.
I just wanted to remind people that when you read the 2008 study, remember it was from 2008. And so that all of the forecasts, the extrapolations on whether it would be feasible, everything in there is not only old data, but remember what happened in 2008? We had a crash, right? So if the data is from 2006 and 2007, that meant a lot of things were artificially increased. Remember the housing crisis, the scam? So from a what needs to be in it standpoint, of course, it's very good to read to understand the elements and pieces that will be in this next, forecast. And always remember, it's a forecast. It's numbers that are thought up based on educated assumptions, but we've got to understand the assumptions. So we need to drill into the details. What makes up that number? Because the devil is always in the details.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Pat, I'm gonna go to this gentleman over here. Me too. I'm joking.
I'm Jordan, everybody. I've been in Birch Bay for 2 years, but my wife's from Blaine. She's a graduate from Blaine High School. I want to let you know that these numbers about the people assigned to the different sectors like Everson and Sumas, these numbers they don't add up the correct way that you see it. You see it as Sumas has 6 people assigned to it. That means 6 people are out there at all times. It's actually 6 total people within their department. Everson has 7. Ferndale has, yes, 26, but they have a lot of things that go on down there. So 6 people, if you cover that in 8-hour shifts, that's 3 people. And then when they have days off, that's 3 more people that cover the 8-hour shift. So they only have 6 people. So they don't take vacation. They don't have equivalent time off. Yes, we have one person that is in Birch Bay, but when that person isn't working, that doesn't mean that there's people assigned. If you saw the sector up there that Sheriff Tanksley has, it was broken up into 4 sectors. One person is assigned to that each and every time. And if something comes out, there's always a person that's next to him. So if we could get the grid up, if that's allowed. What I'm saying is just because we have one person assigned to Birch Bay doesn't mean that he's the only person responding to calls. And I know somebody said that they had a 45-minute wait time. That's probably because the call wasn't necessarily in progress or that the deputies weren't doing anything and whatever the case may be. But there's always somebody that is assigned to Birch Bay, just like someone is always assigned to Sumas. Someone's always assigned to Everson. Just because there's one person doesn't mean that he's responsible for all of Birch Bay all the time. There's still other people that go back him up because there's still, as you can see, for one, there's always somebody in the one, and that does not include Deputy Douglas. He actually is a second person within that one area. And as the law enforcement guy that talked earlier that said, I'm scared for Deputy Douglas and his backup, there's always somebody there, and there's always somebody that will go back up. Like if you see down at the 3 or the 2 or the 4, they can always get out to the one area. So it doesn't mean that he's responding to calls all by himself all the time. I just want to let you know that these numbers. Was it? I worked that 4th of July. I was there and I was directing traffic out here and everybody was either giving me the bird or waving to me. So yes, I worked that 4th of July. What I'm trying to finish it up, just because there's one deputy that is assigned according to this paper doesn't mean that there's only one person responsible for Birch Bay. Where Sumas, it has 6 people, but that's 6 police officers within Sumas, day shift, swing shift, graveyard when we're all sleeping. That is always covered in the sheriff's office. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Yep.
My name's C.D. Berry. I understand how the one person in Birch Bay works, but we were victimized by an arsonist in Birch Bay for a couple of years. And what happened is when we did call 911, when they set our property on fire, the sheriff's office did respond, and I understand the constraints that are happening. I always say that I appreciate law enforcement. I'm thankful for everything you guys do. But it was kind of sad because the sheriffs that came out, he was the guy, he was like a head guy, like a sergeant, but he was so concerned about what we had seen and witnessed at 2 a.m. in Birch Bay that he actually came out. Well, after my husband chases down the guy, which he shouldn't have himself, to Birch Bay. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Well, anyway, he lived in the village with his parents. He's a felon. But anyway, the sheriff actually had to wait until a police officer from Blaine could come and back him up because there were no other sheriffs available. And the thing about having more than one sheriff, I keep hearing Sheriff Tanksley and different people say about 10 officers. Well, we know Officer Douglas is doing his best, but it is just one officer. When a neighbor and a good friend of ours from church was rear-ended by a man going 75, 80 miles an hour down Birch Bay Drive, I couldn't help but think, having driven in Blaine and driven in Linden, that would have never happened on one of the main streets there. And that's because they know that they can't get away with it. There are people that speed here because it's like the wild, wild west sometimes. They know that there is no backup. And I think that it's a great deterrent to have other officers. And I think that we deserve that for the taxes we pay.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make public comment, or I think, did we cover it all? Good. I think we might be able to end early. Is there anything else besides just thanking you all for coming? We really appreciate it. Our next association meeting is going to be May 15th. It's a Thursday. We're going to have a couple of city managers come and speak to the group. I think that's going to be a real productive conversation. Our next steering committee meeting is March 20th, Thursday at 6 o'clock. So you're welcome at all our meetings. Please go to our website, wearebirchbay.org, and thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Sheriff Tanksley, of course, and Deputy Douglas.